You're just a carroty case on a leash. Know your place, carroty girl.
Tiffany Caldwell spat those words while standing over a bleeding girl on a bathroom floor. Grace Underwood, 18, full scholarship. Lying in her own blood because 3 white girls decided she existed in the wrong place. Tiffany crouched down, grabbed Grace's chin, forced eye contact. Then she took a selfie, with Grace's crumpled body in the background.
Look at me when I'm talking to you, scholarship trash.
Posted it with a caption, took out the trash. 3 girls, 0 consequences. That's what they believed. They were wrong. One phone call was about to destroy everything they thought protected them. Stay with me. Let me take you back to where it all started. 3 months before that bathroom floor. Before the blood. Before the bruises. Before the phone call that changed everything. Grace Underwood grew up in Richmond Heights. If you don't know the neighborhood, picture this. Cracked sidewalks, corner stores with bulletproof glass, and front porches where old folks sat watching the world forget about them. It wasn't glamorous, but it was home. Grace was raised by her grandmother, Lorraine Underwood, 72 years old, retired school teacher, and a woman who once marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, with tear gas burning her lungs and dogs snapping at her ankles. In her living room hung 2 framed photographs, one from Selma, one from the March on Washington. She never talked about them unless you asked, and when you asked, she didn't brag. She just said, "We did what had to be done." Lorraine raised Grace with a simple philosophy. You earn everything. You apologize for nothing. And you never, ever let someone make you feel like a guest in your own country. Grace carried that philosophy the way she carried her sketchbook, everywhere. Art was her language. She could spend 4 hours drawing a stranger's hands and forget to eat lunch. Her high school art teacher once told her she had the kind of talent that made other people uncomfortable. Grace didn't fully understand what that meant. Not yet. She graduated top of her class, full academic scholarship to Westerfield University, a private institution with Gothic buildings, manicured lawns, and a tuition that cost more per year than Lorraine's house was worth. The kind of school where last names opened doors and legacy meant more than merit. Grace was the only black freshman in the fine arts program. On move-in day, Lorraine drove her to campus in a 15-year-old sedan that looked out of place between the BMWs and Range Rovers lining the parking lot. They carried 2 suitcases and a box of art supplies up 3 flights of stairs. No one offered to help. Parents in pressed khakis glanced at them and looked away. Lorraine set the last box down, caught her breath, and handed Grace a leather-bound sketchbook. Inside the cover she had written, "For the girl who will make the world see." Grace hugged her so hard the old woman laughed and said, "Baby, I need those ribs." At the door, Lorraine held Grace's face in both hands. "You belong in any room you walk into. Don't you ever forget that." Grace watched her grandmother's car disappear down the tree-lined drive and felt, for the first time in her life, completely alone. Her roommate changed that. Nadia Williams arrived 2 hours later, loud, funny, and carrying a duffel bag held together with duct tape. Also black, also on scholarship, also painfully aware that they were outnumbered. "So," Nadia said, dropping her bag on the bare mattress, "how many confused looks have you gotten today?" Grace laughed for the first time since arriving. "I stopped counting at 12. They became inseparable within a week. Not because they had everything in common. Nadia was pre-law, loud, and confrontational, where Grace was quiet and internal. But because they understood something no one else on that campus could. What it felt like to walk into a room and sense, before anyone spoke, that you weren't expected. That first evening, Grace FaceTimed her mother from the dorm. Denise Underwood appeared on screen in a dark blazer, sitting in an office Grace didn't recognize. The lighting was formal. The furniture looked government-issued. "I'm so proud of you, baby," Denise said. Her voice was warm but distracted. Behind her, someone called out, voices in the background, formal and clipped. "My first week at the new office is intense," Denise said. "But I'll be there for your first showcase, no matter what. Grace smiled. What exactly is the new office, Mom? You've been weirdly vague. Denise laughed. Legal stuff, boring stuff, nothing you'd want to hear about. The call lasted 4 minutes. Grace didn't notice the phone's lock screen when Denise picked up. A seal, round and official, blue and gold. The kind of seal you see on federal buildings, the kind most people scroll right past. But it was there. Remember that. It matters later. Now let me tell you about the other side of campus. Tiffany Caldwell didn't earn her place at Westerfield. She inherited it. Her father, Russell Caldwell, had just donated $12 million to build a new library, the Caldwell Library of Arts and Sciences. His name was already etched in limestone above the entrance before the first book hit the shelf. Tiffany's admission had nothing to do with grades. Her SAT scores were average. Her essays were ghostwritten. But her last name was worth more than any transcript. She arrived on campus in a black Mercedes SUV, trailed by a personal assistant carrying Louis Vuitton luggage. Within the first week, she had established herself as the social center of the freshman class. Not because people liked her, because people feared what happened if they didn't. Brooke Dawson was her enforcer, best friends since prep school. The kind of girl who recorded everything on her phone, not for memories, but for ammunition. She laughed the loudest at Tiffany's jokes and hit the hardest when Tiffany gave the signal. Then there was Paige Harmon, new to the group. Middle-class family, no legacy, no connections. She had latched onto Tiffany's circle the way a drowning person grabs a life raft, not out of loyalty, but survival. She laughed when she was supposed to laugh. She looked away when she was supposed to look away. And she told herself every night that she wasn't really like them. She was wrong about that too. But we'll get to it. The first collision happened in art history, second week of classes. Professor Alderman asked the class to analyze Basquiat's approach to identity and erasure in modern art. Most students gave surface-level answers. Grace raised her hand and delivered a response so precise, so layered, that the professor paused, nodded slowly, and said, "That is exactly right. That is graduate-level thinking." The room went quiet. 30 heads turned. Grace felt their eyes and shrank slightly in her seat. But one pair of eyes didn't look impressed. Tiffany Caldwell sat in the back row, jaw tight, arms crossed. She leaned toward Brooke and whispered just loud enough for the nearest students to hear, "Scholarship case. This should be fun." 2 days later, in the art studio, Tiffany walked past Grace's workstation and knocked her sketchbook off the table. Pages scattered across the floor. Weeks of work, loose and vulnerable. Grace dropped to her knees to gather them. Tiffany didn't help. She stood over Grace and spoke to the room. "Careful, everyone. She might think you're offering charity." Brooke laughed. 2 other students smiled nervously. Paige stared at her own hands. Grace said nothing. She collected every page. Her fingers trembled, but her face betrayed nothing. The professor overheard. He told Tiffany to apologize. She delivered a flat, hollow, "sorry," without looking at Grace. Then she turned to Brooke and whispered, "This isn't over." That night, Tiffany created a group chat. She named it Westerfield Standards. The first message read, "Time to remind Scholarship Girl where she really stands." Grace went to sleep that night believing it was just one bad day. One cruel girl with a loud mouth and too much money. It would pass. It wouldn't pass. It was just the beginning. 2 weeks passed. Grace kept her head down, went to class, worked in the studio, ate meals with Nadia, pretended the whispers didn't follow her through every hallway. She told herself it would get better, that talent speaks louder than cruelty. She was wrong. Tuesday night, late. Grace had stayed in the studio until almost 10, finishing self-portraits for the end-of-semester fine arts showcase. The collection was called Invisible, what it feels like to exist in a space that refuses to see you. Each piece took weeks. They were the best work she had ever done. She walked back to her dorm exhausted but satisfied. The hallway was quiet. She reached her door and stopped. It was open. Not unlocked. Open. The latch was broken. She pushed the door slowly. The air left her lungs. Every piece of artwork stored in the room was destroyed. Canvases slashed, sketches torn and scattered across the floor. Her leather-bound sketchbook, Lorraine's gift, lay open on the bed, every page defaced in red marker. The N-word. Go back to the ghetto. A crude drawing of a monkey pasted over her self-portrait. Grace stood in the center of the wreckage. She didn't scream, didn't cry, just stood there, hands at her sides, face blank. Something behind her eyes had broken. Nadia found her 20 minutes later, still standing, still staring. "Grace, look at me." Grace turned slowly, eyes dry, voice hollow. Nadia didn't hesitate. "We're reporting this, right now." Next morning, Dean of Students' Office, Dr. Harold Whitfield examined the defaced sketchbook, the torn canvases, the photographs of slurs. He sighed, rubbed his temples, leaned back in his leather chair. "This is concerning, but the dormitory corridors don't have cameras on every floor. Without definitive proof of who did this, my hands are tied." Nadia leaned forward. "Are you serious? There are racial slurs all over her work. This is a hate crime." Whitfield's face hardened. "Let's not use language like that, Ms. Williams. Westerfield handles disciplinary matters internally. I'll make a note in the file." A note in the file. Months of artwork destroyed. Racial slurs carved into a student's life. And the dean offered a note and a suggestion. "I'd recommend you lock your door more carefully going forward." He was blaming her, the victim, the girl with a 3.95 GPA who had never caused a single problem. He looked at Grace and decided she was the inconvenience, not the hate, not the violence, not the entitled children of his biggest donor. Because that was the real reason. Russell Caldwell's $12 million check had just cleared. The Caldwell Library was under construction. Harold Whitfield had made the same calculation millions of administrators make. Money matters more than a black girl's dignity. Grace walked out hollowed, leaned against the hallway wall and slid to the floor. Nadia sat beside her. Neither spoke. Finally, Grace whispered, "Maybe I should just transfer." That night she called her mother. Denise answered from somewhere formal, serious voices, clinking glasses. Someone called out clearly in the background, "Counselor Underwood, the Attorney General is ready for you." Denise whispered, "Baby, I only have a minute. What's wrong?" Grace almost told her. The words pressed against her teeth. She swallowed them. "Nothing, Mom, just miss you." "I'll call the university if you need me to. Say the word." "No, I don't want to be that girl who runs to her mother. I'm 18. I should handle this." A long pause, heavy. "Grace, you are never a burden. Remember that." The call ended. Grace stared at the ceiling in the dark and tried to convince herself tomorrow would be different. It wasn't. Next morning, dining hall. Tiffany Caldwell walked past Grace, flashed a beauty queen smile, and said loud enough for the nearest table to hear, "Heard you had some redecorating done. Love the new look of your room." Then she winked. Grace's stomach dropped. Whitfield hadn't just ignored her complaint. He had told the Caldwells about it. The people supposed to protect her were working for the people who hurt her. And it was about to get so much worse. The harassment didn't stop after the dorm room. It evolved. It grew teeth. Within days, a new Instagram account appeared, @Westerfield Truth. Anonymous, no profile picture, no followers at first. But within a week, every freshman on campus had seen it. The first post was Grace's student ID photo, the one taken on move-in day when she was smiling, hopeful, still believing this place might become home. Someone had edited it with bold white text across the bottom. "Diversity admission of the year. Can she even afford textbooks?" 400 likes in 24 hours. The comments were worse. Laughing emojis. "Who let her in?" and "Charity case alert." One anonymous reply read, "Someone needs to teach this girl that Westerfield has standards she can't meet." Grace saw the post during a lecture. She was sitting in the third row of art history, the class where she'd once been praised for graduate-level thinking. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down, read the caption, scrolled through the comments. Then slowly, carefully, she closed her phone, placed it face down on the desk, and stared straight ahead. She didn't raise her hand for the rest of the semester. Nadia screenshotted everything, every post, every comment, every anonymous account that piled on. She compiled them in a folder on her laptop and begged Grace to send them to her mother. Grace refused. She just started the biggest job of her career, Nadia. She's under enormous pressure. I'm not adding to it. Grace, this is harassment. This is targeted. This is racial. I know what it is, but I'm 18. I'm supposed to handle my own life. Nadia stared at her. There's a difference between handling your life and drowning quietly. Grace didn't answer. She picked up her pencil and went back to drawing, but her hand wasn't steady anymore. 2 weeks after the Instagram account launched, things moved from digital to institutional. Russell Caldwell, Tiffany's father, the man whose name was carved in limestone above the library entrance, requested a private meeting with Dean Whitfield. No agenda, no official record. Just two men in a closed office with the blinds drawn. What Russell said in that room was never recorded, but what happened next told the whole story. The following Monday, Grace received an email from the dean's office. Subject line, Scholarship Status Review. She was asked to report to Whitfield's office at 2 o'clock. She went alone. Nadia wanted to come. Grace said no. Whitfield sat behind his desk with his hands folded. He didn't offer her a seat. She stood. Grace, I'll be direct. Your scholarship is under review. There have been concerns raised about your overall campus engagement and social adjustment. Grace blinked. My GPA is 3.95. I haven't missed a single class. Westerfield values the whole student experience. Academics are only part of the equation. What does that mean? Whitfield shifted in his chair. He couldn't meet her eyes. It means the committee will evaluate whether your presence here is mutually beneficial. Mutually beneficial. That was the phrase he chose. As if Grace's existence on campus was a transaction. As if her scholarship was a favor that could be revoked when the math didn't work for the people writing the checks. Grace understood perfectly. Russell Caldwell had walked into this office and told Whitfield to get rid of her. And Whitfield, the man tasked with protecting every student on this campus, had said yes. She walked out without another word, made it to the hallway, took 6 steps. Then her legs gave out. She slid down the wall and sat on the cold tile floor. Her chest heaved, her eyes burned, and for the first time since arriving at Westerfield, Grace Underwood cried. Not because she was weak, because the last door she believed was open had just been slammed in her face, by the very people paid to keep it open. An 18-year-old woman with a near-perfect GPA was about to lose her future, not because she failed, because she dared to exist in a space someone else had decided wasn't meant for her. Now listen carefully, because what happened next changed everything. Friday evening, the night before the Fine Arts Showcase. Grace had spent the last 3 weeks rebuilding her destroyed portfolio from scratch. New canvases, new sketches, working until 2 and 3 in the morning. The new collection was still called Invisible. If anything, it was better than the original. Rawer, more honest, angrier. She stayed late in the art building to finish the final piece. The hallways were empty. Most students had already left for the weekend. The building echoed with silence. At 8:30, Grace walked into the second-floor bathroom. 30 seconds later, the door opened behind her. Tiffany Caldwell walked in first, then Brooke Dawson, then Paige Harmon. Tiffany reached behind her and locked the door. The click echoed off the tiles. Grace saw their faces and knew. "We gave you chance after chance to leave on your own," Tiffany said. Her voice was calm, almost bored. "But you keep showing up, like you actually belong here." Grace straightened her back. "I earned my place, same as anyone." Tiffany tilted her head, smiled. "No, you have a handout, and after tonight you won't even have that." Brooke moved first. She shoved Grace into the wall. The back of Grace's head cracked against the tile, her vision blurred. She stumbled forward. Tiffany slapped her, open hand, hard, then again, harder. Brooke kicked Grace's legs out from under her. She hit the floor. Her elbow cracked against the tile. Pain shot up her arm. Tiffany looked at Paige. "Your turn." Paige stood frozen. Her face was white. Her hands were shaking. "You're either with us," Tiffany said slowly, "or you're the next scholarship case we deal with." Paige stepped forward. She pushed Grace. Barely. More like a touch than a shove. Then she stepped back and looked like she was going to be sick. But Tiffany and Brooke weren't finished. They kicked. They hit. They didn't stop until Grace was curled on the floor, barely conscious, blood on her lip, her left eye swelling shut, her breathing shallow and ragged. Tiffany stood over her, straightened her hair, took out her phone, snapped a selfie with Grace's broken body in the background, typed a caption, "Took out the trash, #Westerfield Standards." Then she unlocked the door and walked out like she'd just left a yoga class. Here's what they didn't know. Nadia Williams was on the other side of that door. She had come to the art building to help Grace prepare for the showcase. She heard shouting through the heavy door, heard the sounds, the slaps, the impact, the laughter. She pressed her ear against the wood and her blood went cold. She couldn't break the lock. She couldn't get in. But she could do one thing. She pulled out her phone and hit record. 3 minutes of audio. Tiffany's voice saying, "You're kind." Brooke laughing. The sound of someone hitting the floor. Then 40 seconds of video shot through the gap under the door. Feet, a body falling, Tiffany's white sneakers stepping over Grace like she was garbage. Nadia's hands shook so badly she almost dropped the phone. But she held on. She held on like her best friend's life depended on it. When the 3 girls walked out, Nadia pressed herself against the wall and let them pass. They didn't see her. They were too busy laughing. Nadia called 911 first, then she made the second call. She scrolled to a contact saved as Auntie D. The profile picture showed a woman in a formal portrait. American flag behind her, dark blazer, a nameplate on the desk that read, "United States Department of Justice." The line rang twice. "Ms. Underwood." Nadia's voice was barely a whisper, cracking, shattered. "They hurt Grace. They hurt her really bad." Silence on the other end. 2 seconds, 3, 4. Then a voice came through the speaker. Not loud, not panicked, cold, controlled. The kind of calm that makes powerful men nervous. "Tell me everything, and don't let anyone leave that building." 15 minutes later, an ambulance screamed into the Westerfield parking lot. EMTs carried Grace out on a stretcher, neck brace, oxygen mask, blood still wet on her face. Students gathered outside froze. Phones came out. Videos started recording. In Whitfield's office, Tiffany, Brooke, and Paige sat in chairs while the dean paced and sweated. He wasn't worried about Grace. He was worried about liability. Russell Caldwell was already on the phone with the university's lawyers. Whitfield told his staff, "This was a student altercation. No media, no official statements." Too late. A parent's dash cam had captured the ambulance. The footage was already on Facebook. Local news had picked it up. It was spreading. They thought they could bury this the way they'd buried everything, with money, silence, and the right phone call. But they had made the worst miscalculation of their lives. Because Grace Underwood's mother wasn't just any parent, and she was already on her way. The emergency room at St. Michael's Hospital smelled like disinfectant and dread. Fluorescent lights hummed above a narrow bed where Grace Underwood lay still. Her left eye was swollen shut. A dark bruise spread across her fractured cheekbone like spilled ink. 3 cracked ribs made every breath a negotiation with pain. She was conscious, barely, drifting in and out, fingers twitching against the white sheet as if reaching for a pencil that wasn't there. Lorraine arrived first. She had driven 4 hours through the night, gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles would ache for days. She walked into the room, saw her granddaughter's face, and stopped dead in the doorway. Her hand went to her mouth. A sound escaped. Not a scream, not a word. Something older than language. The sound of a woman who had survived Selma, who had buried a husband, who had raised 2 generations on faith and iron will, breaking. Then she gathered herself, the way she always did. She sat beside the bed, took Grace's hand, and began to pray. Quietly, steadily. The way she'd prayed on that bridge 60 years ago when the tear gas came and she didn't know if she'd see the other side. 40 minutes later, the door opened again. Denise Underwood walked in like a thunderstorm, wearing a blazer, dark suit, white blouse, hair pulled back tight. Her heels clicked once, twice, 3 times on the linoleum. Measured, deliberate. The walk of a woman who had spent years entering rooms where her presence changed the temperature. And clipped to her belt, a credential badge most people in that hospital had never seen up close. Gold lettering on blue background. An eagle. A seal. The words, United States Department of Justice, in an arc across the top. She reached the bed, looked down at her daughter's face, the swollen eye, the split lip. The bruises are blooming purple and black against brown skin. The hospital gown that had replaced the paint-stained clothes Grace always wore. Denise didn't scream. She didn't cry. She leaned down, kissed Grace's forehead, whispered 5 words. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Grace's fingers tightened around her mother's hand. A single tear slid from her unswollen eye. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Denise held that hand for exactly 90 seconds. She memorized every bruise, every cut, every mark left by girls who thought cruelty had no price tag. Then she straightened up, gently released Grace's fingers, and walked into the hallway. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and everything about Denise Underwood changed. Her jaw set like concrete. Her eyes went flat, not empty, but focused the way a rifle scope focuses. Her spine straightened into something that boardrooms feared and courtrooms respected. She was no longer a mother standing in a hospital hallway. She was a weapon, and she had just been aimed. She took out her phone, dialed a number from memory. It rang once. "This is United States Attorney Denise Underwood. I need the FBI Civil Rights Division on the line immediately. I'm reporting a racially motivated assault on a college campus within my district." Let me say that again, slowly, so it lands. United States Attorney Denise Underwood, FBI, Civil Rights Division. Grace's mother, the woman Tiffany Caldwell dismissed as irrelevant, the woman Russell Caldwell never bothered to Google, the woman Dean Whitfield assumed was just another worried parent from the wrong zip code, was the chief federal prosecutor for the entire judicial district. She had jurisdiction over hate crimes, civil rights violations, institutional corruption, obstruction of justice. She had dismantled drug cartels, prosecuted corrupt politicians, stood in front of federal judges and won cases that made national headlines. And her 18-year-old daughter, her only child, had just been beaten unconscious in a university bathroom while a dean deleted security footage to protect a donor's family. Tiffany Caldwell's father had $12 million. Dean Whitfield had a reputation to protect. Denise Underwood had the full authority of the United States Department of Justice. This was never going to be a fair fight. Not anymore. Within 24 hours, everything the Caldwells had built to protect their daughter began to collapse like a house of cards in a hurricane. FBI agents arrived at Westerfield University at 7 in the morning. Not campus security, not local police. Federal agents in dark suits with badges that made the front desk receptionist's hands tremble as she reached for the phone. They carried warrants, multiple warrants, signed by a federal judge before sunrise. They seized hallway security footage, what remained of it. They imaged the university's email servers. They confiscated Tiffany Caldwell's phone, Brooke Dawson's phone, and every device connected to the @Westerfield Truth Instagram account. They interviewed 19 students before lunch. Every single one confirmed the same pattern. Months of targeted harassment directed at Grace Underwood. The Instagram account was traced in under 3 hours. IP address, Brooke Dawson's laptop. Every single post liked from Tiffany Caldwell's personal account. The group chat, Westerfield Standards, contained 4 months of messages, racial slurs, coordinated planning, screenshots of Grace's social media mocked line by line, and one message from Tiffany sent the night before the attack. Tomorrow we finish this. Nadia's recordings were entered into federal evidence. 3 minutes of crystal clear audio. Tiffany's voice. Your kind doesn't belong here. The sound of a body hitting tile. Brooke laughing. 40 seconds of video through the gap under the door. Feet shuffling. A girl collapsing. White sneakers stepping over a black woman's crumpled body like it was litter on a sidewalk. Sergeant Elaine Crawford, the local detective who had been quietly ordered by her captain to keep this one low profile because Russell Caldwell donated heavily to the Police Benevolent Fund, felt the weight lift off her chest when the feds walked through the precinct door. She handed over her suppressed initial report within the hour. Every detail, every timestamp, everything she had been ordered to bury. That afternoon, Russell Caldwell's personal attorney called the U.S. Attorney's Office. Polite, professional, requesting a preliminary conversation about resolution options. Standard playbook for the wealthy. Make a call. Suggest a number. Make it disappear before dinner. The deputy chief took the call, listened for 30 seconds, then spoke. Sir, I need to inform you that the U.S. attorney for this district has recused herself from this case due to a personal conflict of interest. The victim is her daughter. Silence. 10 seconds. 15. 20. Her daughter? Yes, sir. Grace Underwood is the daughter of United States Attorney Denise Underwood. The lawyer hung up, called Russell Caldwell, and said 4 words that no amount of money in the world could undo. We need a completely different strategy. There was no strategy. Not for this. Not anymore. 3 days after the attack, Denise stood on the granite steps of the federal courthouse. She had formally recused herself from the prosecution and personally ensured the case was assigned to Assistant U.S. Attorney Carolyn Walsh, known in legal circles as the Closer. 11 years prosecuting hate crimes, 0 losses. But Denise wasn't at that podium as a prosecutor. She was there as a mother. National media filled the courthouse plaza. CNN, MSNBC, local affiliates from 6 states. Photographers jostled for position. Camera flashes popped like silent lightning. Behind Denise stood Lorraine, 72 years old, spine straight as a flagpole, hands clasped at her waist, face carved from 6 decades of dignity that no amount of hatred had ever bent. Denise stepped to the microphone. No notes, no teleprompter, just a mother and a truth she refused to let anyone look away from. 3 days ago, my 18-year-old daughter was beaten unconscious in a university bathroom by 3 of her classmates, because of the color of her skin. Silence. She let it breathe, let it press against every chest in that plaza. The institution that was supposed to protect her knew about months of racial harassment. They knew, and they chose to protect a donor's $12 million check instead of my child's safety. Her voice didn't waver, didn't rise. It stayed level and devastating, like a blade drawn slowly across glass. I stand before you today not as a federal prosecutor. Today, I am simply a mother. And I am telling every parent in this country, black, white, brown, our children deserve to be safe in the places where they go to learn. She looked directly into the center camera, directly into every living room, every phone screen, every pair of eyes watching. The federal government will pursue this case with the full force of the law, not because Grace is my daughter, but because she could be anyone's daughter. 4 minutes. That's how long the speech lasted. It went viral in 2 hours. Hashtag Justice for Grace trended nationally by dinner. Students on campuses across 30 states posted solidarity photos. Civil rights organizations issued formal statements. Legal analysts filled cable news panels explaining that under federal hate crime statutes, the 3 attackers, all 18, all legal adults, faced up to 10 years in federal prison. Not juvenile detention, not a counseling program, not a stern letter in a file. Federal prison. The dominoes fell with the weight of inevitability. Tiffany Caldwell and Brooke Dawson were arrested at their parents' homes the following morning. Federal marshals, handcuffs, a perp walk past news cameras that Russell Caldwell's entire legal team couldn't block. Charged under 18 U.S.C. Section 249, the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act, with conspiracy to commit a hate crime and aggravated assault motivated by racial animus. Paige Harmon was charged separately with a lesser federal count. Her visible hesitation during the attack and minimal physical involvement were noted in the complaint. That distinction mattered. It would matter even more later. Russell Caldwell was placed under federal investigation for obstruction of justice. Phone records revealed 3 calls to the local police captain within 12 hours of the attack. Calls pressuring the department to classify the beating as a minor student altercation. His company's city contracts were frozen. The Caldwell Library construction was halted. His name, once carved in limestone, was suddenly carved in shame. Dean Harold Whitfield was terminated by the Westerfield University Board of Trustees after FBI forensic analysts recovered the deleted security footage from the hallway outside the bathroom. Whitfield had erased it personally the night of the attack. He was charged with federal obstruction of justice and Title IX reporting violations. Permanently banned from educational administration, the board issued a public apology. Mandatory anti-racism training for all staff and students, a new chief diversity officer, and a full academic scholarship fund, named after Grace Underwood. In 72 hours, every person who believed they were untouchable learned exactly what accountability looks like when you cannot write a check to make it disappear. Grace watched the press conference from her hospital bed. Lorraine sat beside her, holding her hand the same way she'd held it since Grace was small enough to fit in her lap. When Denise said those words, "She could be anyone's daughter," Grace's eyes filled, not with pain, not with fear, with something she hadn't felt in months, something she thought Westerfield had beaten out of her. Being seen. She turned to her grandmother, voice quiet, almost a whisper. "Grandma, were you scared? In Selma?" Lorraine looked at her, a long, deep look. Then she smiled, soft, ancient, unbreakable. "Every single day, baby. But I wasn't marching for myself. I was marching for you, for this exact moment, so that when someone tried to break you, the whole country would stand up and say, 'No, not anymore.'" Grace was quiet for a long time. The heart monitor beeped. Lorraine hummed softly. Outside, the sun was going down. Then Grace reached for the pencil on the hospital tray. She hadn't drawn since the attack. Her right hand was bruised. Her fingers ached when she closed them around the wood. She drew anyway. A self-portrait. Bruised face, swollen eye, split lip. But in the drawing, she wasn't looking down. She wasn't crying. She wasn't invisible. She was staring straight at the viewer, steady, unbroken, daring anyone to look away. She wrote the title in small, careful letters at the bottom corner. "Still here. Now, if you go back to part 2, back to that FaceTime call on move-in day, you'll see it. The phone screen, the seal, blue and gold, the eagle, the words you scrolled right past because you didn't think they mattered. United States Department of Justice. It was there the whole time, hidden in plain sight. You just didn't know what you were looking at." 2 weeks after the arrest, Paige Harmon made a phone call no one expected. She called the office of Assistant U.S. Attorney Carolyn Walsh directly. No lawyer, no parents, just Paige, alone, saying she wanted to cooperate. Walsh agreed to meet. No promises, no deals on the table. Paige arrived at the federal building looking like she hadn't slept in 2 weeks, because she hadn't. Dark circles, red-rimmed eyes, hands clasped so tight her knuckles were bone white. Walsh placed a recorder on the table. "Talk." Paige talked. She gave them everything. The group chat, the months of planning, Tiffany's escalating obsession with driving Grace off campus. the racial slurs that started as whispers and became a campaign. Brooke recording the attack on Snapchat, a video the FBI hadn't yet recovered. The night before the attack, Tiffany was standing in her dorm room saying, "Tomorrow we show scholarship trash what happens when you don't take a hint." Paige gave dates, names, screenshots saved on a backup drive because some part of her, the part she'd spent months suffocating, always knew this was wrong. When she finished, Walsh studied her. "Why now?" Paige crumbled. "Because I stood in that bathroom and watched. I heard her head hit the wall, I saw the blood, and I pushed her. I put my hands on a girl who was already on the floor because I was scared of what Tiffany would do to me if I didn't." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "That's not an excuse. I know it's not. I see Grace's face every night before I fall asleep. I want to make this right."
Whatever it takes.
Walsh offered a deal. Charges reduced to a federal misdemeanor. 300 hours of community service at a civil rights organization. A formal public apology, written, specific, read aloud at a university community forum. In exchange, full testimony against Tiffany and Brooke. No conditions. Paige accepted without hesitation. She wrote the apology over 3 days, rewrote it 11 times. The final version was 2 pages of raw accountability. No excuses, no self-pity. She read it at the community forum on a Thursday evening. The auditorium was full. Students, faculty, media, community members. Her hands shook so badly the paper rattled against the microphone. "I want to say this directly to Grace Underwood. What I did was wrong. Not complicated, not nuanced, wrong. I stood in a room while 2 people beat you unconscious and I did nothing. I was a coward. My cowardice made me complicit in one of the worst things I have ever witnessed." Her voice cracked. Tears fell onto the podium. "I don't ask for your forgiveness. I haven't earned it. But I will spend the rest of my life making sure I never fail someone like this again." Grace wasn't there. She had chosen not to attend. But Lorraine was, 3rd row, center seat, hands folded, expression unreadable. When Paige finished, the room held its breath. No applause, no murmurs, 300 people in absolute silence. Lorraine looked at the podium, then she nodded. Once. Slowly. Paige saw it, and broke down completely. That nod. From a woman who had marched through tear gas and earned the right to withhold grace from anyone, carried more weight than any verdict a judge could deliver. Paige Harmon didn't deserve forgiveness, not yet, but she chose accountability when silence was easier. She chose truth when lies were safer. And sometimes, that is exactly where redemption begins. 1 month later, Grace walked back through the gates of Westerfield University. The campus she returned to was not the campus she had left. Whitfield's nameplate was gone. In his place sat Dr. Adrian Cole, new interim dean of students. A black woman with 20 years in higher education and 0 tolerance for institutional cowardice. New murals lined the arts building, bold, unapologetic celebrations of diversity. Mandatory anti-racism curriculum implemented across every department. The words Caldwell Library had been removed from the limestone. It was now simply the University Library. Students watched Grace cross campus. Some couldn't meet her eyes. Others approached with quiet, awkward apologies. A white student named Colton Moore handed her a handmade card signed by 50 classmates. "We should have spoken up. We're sorry. We'll do better." Grace read it twice, folded it carefully, put it in her bag. That evening, the Fine Arts Showcase finally happened, 3 months late. Grace's collection, Invisible, hung on the gallery walls. 6 pieces rebuilt from destruction, each one more powerful than the original. And in the center, mounted on the main wall, the piece that stopped every person who entered the room. Still here. Bruised face, swollen eye, but those eyes, steady, burning, alive, staring directly at you, daring you to look away. No one did. Within a week, a prestigious art institute offered Grace a summer exchange program. They had seen "Still Here" online. They said it was the kind of work that changes how people see the world. Lorraine's inscription had come true. For the girl who will make the world see. That night, Grace and Denise sat on Lorraine's front porch. Fireflies drifted across the yard. Grace held a new sketchbook, another gift from Lorraine, inscribed differently this time. For the girl who refused to disappear. Grace looked at her mother. "Why didn't you step in sooner? When they destroyed my room, when they threatened my scholarship,
You could have ended it with one phone call."
Denise chose her words carefully, the way she chose them in courtrooms. "Because I wanted you to know that your voice matters on its own, that you shouldn't need a powerful mother for people to treat you with basic dignity. You're 18. You're building your own life. I needed you to see how the system breaks, because when you understand that, you become the person who fixes it. And when the system fails completely, that's when we step in, not with rage, with the law, with the truth, with everything we've got." Grace leaned her head against her mother's shoulder. Lorraine watched from the kitchen window. 3 generations of Underwood women. The marcher, the prosecutor, the artist. Different weapons, same war, same unbreakable refusal to be erased. She smiled, and let them have their moment. Grace didn't win because her mother was powerful. She won because what happened to her was wrong. And for once, the people with power chose to act. Here's what happened to everyone. Tiffany Caldwell and Brooke Dawson stood trial in federal court. Not as juveniles, as adults. The evidence was overwhelming. Nadia's recordings, the group chat messages, the Instagram account, Paige's testimony, and the recovered Snapchat video that showed Brooke filming the attack while laughing. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty. Both counts. Each defendant. Tiffany Caldwell, the girl who took a selfie over a bleeding body and called it taking out the trash, was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Brooke Dawson received the same. 5 years. No parole hearings for at least 3. No daddy's lawyer making it disappear. No check large enough to buy their way out. The judge looked at both of them before delivering the sentence and said something that made national news. "You believed that wealth and privilege made you untouchable. This court exists to prove that belief wrong." Russell Caldwell pled guilty to obstruction of justice. $1.2 million in fines. Permanent forfeiture of every city contract his company held. 500 hours of community service. His name was removed from the Westerfield Library, chiseled off the limestone the same way his daughter had tried to chisel Grace Underwood out of existence. His $12 million donation bought him nothing but a legacy of shame. Dr. Harold Whitfield, the dean who deleted security footage, blamed a victim, and sold a student's safety for a donor's check, pled guilty to federal obstruction and Title IX violations. 18 months of probation, permanently banned from working in education. He now speaks at campus safety conferences, not as an expert, as a cautionary tale. Paige Harmon completed her 300 hours of community service at a civil rights museum. She transferred to a different university. She volunteers now as a peer advocate for campus safety, talking to freshmen about bystander responsibility, about the cost of silence, about what happens when you choose fear over conscience. She and Grace are not friends. They may never be. But Grace accepted her apology, and Paige understood that acceptance was not the same as forgiveness, and that she might spend years earning the difference. Grace Underwood finished her freshman year at Westerfield University with a 3.96 GPA. Her painting, Still Here, was selected for the National Young Artists Exhibition in Washington, D.C. It hung in a gallery 3 blocks from the Department of Justice building where her mother went to work every morning. Denise stood in front of it for 20 minutes on opening night. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Grace is now a sophomore, fine arts major, social justice minor. She still carries a sketchbook everywhere. She still draws strangers' hands when she's thinking. She still sits with Nadia in the dining hall, only now other students ask to join them. She is not the same girl who arrived on campus with a suitcase and a leather-bound sketchbook. She is stronger, sharper, more certain of her place in any room she enters. Not because of what was done to her, but because of what she refused to let it take from her. Now let me share something with you. According to the FBI's 2023 hate crime statistics, over 11,000 hate crime incidents were reported in the United States in a single year. Nearly 60% were motivated by racial bias. On college campuses, hate crimes rose 25% between 2019 and 2023. 1 in 5 black college students reported experiencing racial harassment during their freshman year. Behind every one of those numbers is a grace. A young person who walked into a place meant for learning and was told, through words, through fists, through silence, that they didn't belong. Most of those stories never make the news. Most of those graces never get justice. Not because justice doesn't exist, but because no one stood up, no one recorded, no one made the call. And that's where you come in. If this story made you feel something, anger, frustration, sadness, hope, I need you to do something with that feeling before it fades, before you scroll past, before the algorithm buries it. If you see injustice on a campus, at a workplace, in a parking lot, on a bus, don't look away. You don't need to be a United States attorney. You don't need a badge or a title or a law degree. You need to be a witness. Record it, report it, speak up. Stand next to the person everyone else is stepping over, because silence is not neutral. Silence is a choice. And it is the choice that lets people like Tiffany Caldwell believe they will never face consequences. Share this story. Not for views, not for the algorithm. Share it because somewhere right now, right this second, there is grace. Sitting alone in a dorm room, staring at the ceiling, wondering if anyone in the world gives a damn. Show her they do. And if you are a grace, if you are the one being told you don't belong, that you're not enough, that you should be grateful for the crumbs they let you have, hear me. You are not invisible. You are not alone. Your story is not over. And the people who tried to break you, they have no idea what they created. Still here. Now tell me in the comments, who in your life is a grace? Who deserves to hear this story today? Like this, share this, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
Tiffany and Brooke, 5 years federal prison each. The dean, fired forever, Cutwell's name chiseled off the building. But that's not the part that should keep you up tonight. Grace got justice, but let's be honest about why. Her mother is a U.S. attorney. One phone call and the FBI was on campus before breakfast. One phone call and every person who covered it up lost everything. But before that call, Grace reported months of racial harassment. Slurs caved into her artwork, her scholarship threatened for no reason, and the dean looked at her and said, "Lock the door more carefully." He chose a $12 million check over an 18-year-old girl's safety. Now, here's the question that will leave me alone. If Denise Underwood had been a nurse, a cashier, a single mom pulling double shifts, would anyone have come? Because right now, somewhere in this country, there's another Grace, same bruises, same slurs, same silence from the people paid to protect her, but no powerful mother, no federal badge, no focal that changes everything. That for that girl, and for that girl, nobody's coming. So, who shows up for her? That's not a question for the government. That's a question for you and for me, for every person who watched this video and felt something. Are we the vocal or are we the silent? Tell me in the comments. What would you do? Share this, like and subscribe. And remember, justice shouldn't depend on who your mother is.